I hope everyone has been enjoying the event so far. I know we're just at about the halfway point, so I wanted to make sure we get to as many of the questions as we can. But to get started, I'd like to invite everybody to meet our panel. I'll start at the top. I have Frank Meltke. He's the CEO over at Contraco. Welcome, Frank.
Great having me.
Next, we have Steve Senterfit, and Steve is the president over at Smartbridge. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Next, Max Oglesby. He is over at Monstar Lab.
Thank you, Michael.
Welcome. Next, I have Akhil Verghese. He's the CEO over at Krazimo. Welcome, Akhil.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here.
And finally, we have Steve Flavell. He's the co-founder and CEO of LoopUp. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all.
So I want to keep everybody on target. So let me just jump right into the questions that have come in up until this point. So the first question that came in was for Steve Flavell. And this is from Rachel, who is located just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And Rachel's question is, as you help enterprises move from on-prem PBXs to cloud-based AI-ready telecom, what governance checkpoints do you recommend so telecom restructuring does not outpace security and compliance readiness in highly regulated regions?
Yeah, I mean, regulation is an essential and an extremely painful part of what we do, actually, because we're licensed in tens of countries around the world as a licensed telecoms provider, and that comes with a whole lot of regulation, administration, and effort. So it's a big part, actually, of our behind-the-scenes operations. That's one big side of it, making sure that we're doing everything according to the in-country regulator and in line with their practices. The other big side of it is the key piece that we add in to telecoms. So in addition to the multinationalness of how LoopUp deploys, which is the fundamentals of it, we do it in a way that's integrated with Microsoft Teams. Now, there are different ways of doing that. There's a methodology called direct routing, which can allow actually for a lot of flexibility and different scenarios in terms of how you deploy your telecoms into Microsoft Teams. But there is more room for maneuver, but there's also more room for error in terms of those implementations and governance. So I think that was one of the main reasons that Microsoft introduced their second methodology called Operator Connect, which is much more locked down. It's much more governed by Microsoft. You have to pass all sorts of tests in every country that you want to offer Operator Connect in to be accredited by Microsoft. And then it comes with their accreditation and their SLAs as well. So the Operator Connect side of it is a big piece of that governance as well.
Fantastic. Max, this next question came in for you, and it was from David, who's just outside of Chicago, Illinois, here in the US. And David is asking, when you frame AI as a discovery-driven general purpose technology rather than a SaaS product, how do you get a Fortune 500 board to shift its investment thesis from picking the right platform to owning workflows, data, and outcomes instead?
Thanks, Michael. It's a great question. I think what we're advising clients to do is to take a portfolio-led approach to their AI implementation. And so at the board level, what I would imagine that might look like would be to put your AI investment in terms of almost departmental or initiative level budgets and give those operators of those initiatives or those departments some autonomy in how they dispense with that budget or put that budget to work. I really think top-down fails in this instance, and the closer you can get to the people who are inside of the workflows in the business where AI can be leveraged to the greatest effect, the better. And so I think you sort of have to set up an environment of permission and trust and get that decision making sort of out of the boardroom, frankly, and down into the lower levels of the company where I think the people actually have the insight and maybe the inspiration to know what to do with that opportunity.
This next question is for Steve Senterfit. And Steve, this comes to us from Olivia, who is in Columbus, Ohio. And Olivia is asking, in your client work, what has been the most effective way to blend predictive models, generative AI, and agents into a single workflow without creating unmanageable spider webs of integrations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, one thing we look at is, does the organization have a common data foundation where we don't ever recommend you tie your AI directly into your operational systems. Put a data foundation in that allows the data to sit kind of in a data lake or something like that, where the AI can then ingest and make the actions. The other aspect of this, and to Olivia's question, is we recommend, especially getting started early in your AI journey, is to look at more human in the loop from a model standpoint, where your generative AI is making recommendations, but it's still up to the individual. The predictive models, so you could have machine learning models running in the background, but all of it's being served up in a combination of a generative AI solution that the human is having interactions with. They're still making the decisions, making the actions. Those same intelligence from a predictive model can then also be fed into analytical tools like Power BI, Tableau, and others that allow the entire organization to have that visibility.
The next question comes to us, this is for Frank, from Jonathan here in the US in San Francisco. And Jonathan is asking, when you warn about AI as a multiplier of broken processes, what is the first step or diagnostic or approach you use with executive teams to surface race to the bottom patterns before they hardwire them into a large-scale AI rollout?
The first question we always ask, do we have the right data for the right problem? And this is quite important that even the board understands, if we have bad data, we are only worsening these data. If we have a bad process in place, the process will be much quicker, but not in a higher quality. So the very first question is, what's the problem? Have we all a common understanding about the problem? And do we have the right data to solve that problem?
Sounds like an effective approach. The next question is for Akhil, and this comes to us from Anthony, who is right in New York City. And Anthony is asking, when you talk about deeply connecting AI to CRMs, calendars, order systems, and entitlements, what architectural patterns do you recommend so these agents stay maintainable as vendors, schemas, and policies continue to change over time?
Hey, Anthony. Yeah, great question. So I think there's a fairly extensive AI governance setup that goes in before any of these integrations happen. And they mainly revolve around defining every single element of what data exists, what tools exist, what calls exist, and implementing the guardrails and the logging requirements, the auditing requirements, the human oversight requirements on all of those data systems. Any modification of those systems over time, whether that's, obviously not simply the addition of new data in the same format, but any changes in the format, any changes in the structure, you need to set really rigorous rules as to how you also have to simultaneously update the rules of engagement for AI with all of these systems and practices. So taking the time to not only set up the structure, the guardrails, the rules first, but then also define how these rules will evolve as things change, and then enforcing that in a completely deterministic manner, just essentially not allowing people to make changes until they've also updated the associated rules of engagement for AI, can kind of protect you as you add agents, and then your team can experiment quite liberally, which is how you should experiment with AI. You should be quite liberal with the experimentation, but strict with the governance.
And the next question comes to us for Steve Flavell, and this is from Andre, who is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Andre is asking, when global carriers retire PSTN and copper, what are the most common pitfalls you see in multinational rollouts, especially around numbering plans and local emergency calling? And how do you de-risk those early in the process?
Well, numbering is one of the biggest headaches of telecoms when you're in that sort of change of phase. The whole porting process over to new suppliers is fraught with difficulties because there's always a losing carrier in the situation. So there's somebody you want to move service over to, and there's somebody you're taking service away from, and there's never a particularly good incentive for the losing carrier to easily accommodate that, shall we say. So that's one of the common pitfalls is porting. Something that we've worked hard on in that respect is to really codify the requirements of every carrier that we port away from and over to, so that we know exactly the structure, not only the nature of the data, but the structure of the data that we have to get from a customer in order for that shift to happen. So it's one of the main drivers of a seamless switchover and implementation, particularly when you're moving over to a provider like LoopUp that can put everything through Teams. I think there's so much to be gained that you've just got to manage the process well. We have a team of consultants that will help the customer through that process, a whole team associated with number porting that will work with the carriers involved. So I think it's all in the process and the onboarding.
Makes sense, and these are not small undertakings, so having the right support obviously is key. Max, the next question comes for you from Nicole, who is in Alpharetta, Georgia, I believe, right outside of Atlanta. And Nicole is asking, you cite research showing most Gen AI pilots fail to deliver P&L impact. What is the first financial signal you ask CFOs to track that proves an AI initiative is becoming an operating model shift, not just a lab experiment?
I mean, I think the classic two would be some increase in revenues or some decrease in costs. That would be sort of the classic view. I think there's a lot of instrumentation that you could do sort of upstream of that, though, around the human inputs to various processes and whether those either human inputs are becoming more efficient or the quality of the outputs are becoming measurably better. So it really depends what workflow it is. To give you just a quick case study, we're doing work with a civil engineering firm, and it's really clear. There's a certain process in their kind of step-by-step land development sequence that took 3 to 4 weeks in the old way of doing things, quote unquote, and with some AI enabled automations that we've built for them, they can do that same amount of work in half a day, roughly. So from 3 or 4 weeks to half a day. That's a pretty clear signal. Not all of these are going to be that easy to measure. But I really think it comes down to understanding what that specific workflow is. And I think you'd find that a lot of the KPIs are similar to what you would have found in any kind of classical orchestration or automation job. It's not really new ground that you're trying to break from a measurement standpoint. I think it's just the tools are evolved.
This next question is for Steve Senterfit. This comes to us from Monica, who's in Houston, Texas. And Monica asks, for enterprises that want to move from rule-based automation to agentic AI, what are the concrete criteria you use to decide which steps in a process can be safely handled or handed to an AI agent versus kept strictly under human control?
Yeah, Monica, I'm in Houston as well, so nice to get a question from the hometown. So, and it is a great question. One of the things that we always look at when we're starting that process is what's the risk level. So we work a lot in the oil and gas industry. Safety is a big concern. So when you're looking at automation, whether you're looking at traditional RPA, just robotic process automation, or you're moving more into the agentic AI, really the risk profile. You have to look at the risk profile of your workflow and understanding what's the safety net if an agentic AI agent makes a decision and does something, how quickly can you revert back? And that really comes down to a risk management approach that you have to apply to that workflow. We recommend organizations start on a conservative nature when you start going down that path, and save the automation of those critical steps and keep those to the lower risk items. But it all comes down to risk management and understanding how to measure that risk.
This next question is one that came in a few times from a few different people, so I'll pick one here. This is for Frank. And Frank, this is from Jonas, who's in Berlin, Germany. And Jonas is asking, when a global enterprise is still running on mainframes across multiple jurisdictions, how do you sequence modernization and AI adoption so they avoid the illusion that AI alone can make legacy architectures go away?
That's a very interesting and good question. And it's one we had to answer with one of our clients recently. A big multinational company with mainframe databases, very modern technology facing to the web. But in the back, there was the mainframe holding more or less data for 60 years, all client transactions. And the idea was AI is the silver bullet, and you can offload all the data from that mainframe into a modern data lake architecture. Yeah, you have very structured data in that mainframe, but on the other hand side, in all the other systems, you had 47 client IDs for one and the same person. And there is no AI approach out there who can automatically somehow bring these data together and save it into a data lake. That brings me back to my first question. First, you need to understand the problem. Then you need to understand what data you have in place. That is human beings needing to answer that question. And then you can ask AI to help you to merge these data.
Yeah, these are real world problems that many executives are dealing with, and there is no black and white one size fits all answer. So this next question is for Akhil, and this comes to us from Lauren, who's in, let's see, she's in Phoenix, Arizona, and Lauren is asking, you highlight the risk of celebrating higher connection rates that actually degrade downstream close rates. How do you instrument funnels so leaders can see in real time whether AI is improving or diluting overall pipeline quality?
Yeah, great question, Lauren. So I think that what I have found most effective in doing this is and I think Max kind of alluded to this as well in what he said, is define the clear metric that moves the needle and make sure that that metric is measurable. So, for example, if you're trying to automate outbound sales, right? You could say that the metric is response rate, but I have personally found that response rate is kind of a terrible metric because you could cold email a lot of people and say, "Hey, I'm offering you a free trial of something, and there's no risk, and like all that'll happen is we give you this much service for free." And you may get a high response rate, but that's not ultimately relevant to the net result, which is, do you close someone that is actually going to pay your business, right? So what I have found really useful is to look at anything that you're trying to automate from the perspective of what is it net for you currently in terms of how does it move the needle on your revenue? How much does it cost you in terms of the people that are doing it currently or the software that you're using to do it currently? And then you will be better able to identify exactly what metric you should measure when you're evaluating how successful an automation is, which is usually the measure you should use when you're deciding how to roll out an automation. So if you're converting 6% of the people that you reach out to, you have to realize that if that drops to 5% or 4% and your revenue is really high, you may, even if your AI automated solution is almost free and your salespeople cost $50,000, $100,000 a year, you may still be losing money because that 2% drop may actually net less revenue. So it's really important to define the criteria for success you have beforehand and ensure that criteria is sort of measurable. And ideally try to set all of that in stone before you begin the AI deployment, because I found that once people start deploying, they twist and turn just to make it seem like the AI is doing well.
This next question comes to us for Steve Flavell. This is from Raleigh, North Carolina, from Grace. And Grace's question is, for an organization like ours, standardizing on Microsoft's Teams calling over 100 countries, how do you advise them to balance centralization with the need for regional resiliency and local carrier redundancy?
You have to have both. So you don't have to have both, but it would be ideal to have both. And the way our business model is all about the consolidation side, of course, and all the efficiencies you get from that. So you only have one contract, one support team to deal with, albeit they all around the world, one renewal process, one portal for all your analytics and management of all your people. There's so many efficiencies to the consolidation. But the way we deal with the challenge, which is the regional optimization, is underlying LoopUp. We have 25 carrier partners and growing all the time that we work with, and we choose them on the basis of a best in class for their region and their local geographic situation. So we're getting that local and regional optimization through the underlying carrier partners that we work with. So you can have the best of both worlds in that respect. Also, we have a sort of a backbone of network ourselves. So rather than the normal situation, which is if you have an international call, that may get handed off between carriers multiple times before it gets to its end destination. Because of the core LoopUp backbone and the various data centers we have around the world that are all interconnected, we only have one handoff to the terminating carrier locally. So you're getting better quality, you're getting lower cost, and you can have your cake and eat it in that respect.
This next question comes to us for Max, and this is from Helena, who's in Stockholm, Sweden. And Helena's asking, you compare AI to prior general purpose technologies like electricity and the internal combustion engine. What is the modern equivalent of rewiring the factory that digital leaders should be funding over the next 24 months?
Thanks, Helena. It's funny that there's a book by a guy named Wolfgang Schiffelbach, I think is his name. He has like the funniest name, great name. And he talks about the earliest stages of the Industrial Revolution and power in factories. And the very first thing that people did with the rotary engine, the steam engine, was to pump water back up mill chases. So the factories stayed hydropowered, but if there was a drought or the water stopped flowing, they would use a motor to pump water up to the top of the mill chase and kind of force it back through the mill wheel. I think we're at that stage of AI right now, where we're effectively using AI as a sort of engine along the side of our typical enterprise workflows. We're using AI to metaphorically pump water up the mill chase. I think you're only seeing the beginnings of AI operations truly embedded in enterprises. So I don't know if I'm answering Helena's question quite correctly, but if the request was to compare the current sort of AI moment to previous,
yeah, I think so.
Revolutions, I'd say we're in like the first half of the first chapter, where we're basically using AI as a way to augment legacy systems and legacy workflows. But I think all of that will change over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And future enterprises, I think, will be sort of unrecognizable compared to what we're doing now.
Yeah, I think even though we're deep in the middle of where we are, it's still early on. This next question is for Steve Senterfit, and it comes to us from Brian, who's in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Brian is asking, when you introduce agentic AI into existing BPA estates, how do you prevent shadow automations from popping up in the business and instead keep everything traceable with clear audit trails and ownership?
Brian, appreciate the question. There's two aspects of this. One is around the governance that the organizations need to put in place. That's important. That will also help reduce shadow, just like you had shadow IT. You could wind up having shadow automations popping up and things being done outside of it. So that's a piece of it, making sure that you have the right governance framework in place from an operational standpoint. The other, and he referenced it in the question itself, and that's the audit and traceability. Ensuring that you have that and that it's embedded in the feedback loop and the transparency in the solution, whether you're putting analytics on top of that, so the organization can see the decisions that have been made, the actions that have been taken by the AI solution. But that also is needed for ongoing training of those agentic AI agents, especially if they're being driven off of any type of machine learning algorithms and data sets that are being generated by that. Those would be the two main pieces. The other piece is on the human side, and that's ensuring that when you're implementing these, you're not layering the AI agentic agents just on top of a workflow, but embedded in the workflow. And the reason that's important is if it's just layered on top, the adoption will typically lag. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of enterprises don't see pilots scaling up, is they're layering on top of an existing workflow versus embedding it in maybe a re-engineered workflow. That will also help prevent shadow processes popping up.
This next question is for Frank, and this comes to us from Eric, who's just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And Eric is asking, you emphasize diagnosing before prescribing. What does a concrete initial discovery sprint look like when you were deciding whether AI is the right lever versus simpler processes or policy changes?
Very complex question, as the environment is complex. The first question is, what is the department or the departments involved in that problem? You need the human side, and you need to understand how that process looks like and what problem needs to be solved. So the discovery will be more on the use case than on the technology. And if you understood the use case, then you can recommend the best approach from a technology point of view. For sure, you need to consider some frameworks, you need to consider legal aspects to it. But first, you need to understand the use case, and then you can recommend.
And I want to keep everybody on track for the next session, but I'm going to pose the final question to Akhil. And this comes to us from Kevin, who's in Seattle, Washington. And I'm picking this question because I think it's something that applies to just about every organization at the event today. So Akhil, Kevin is asking, when you map an end-to-end sales or support workflow, what is the most overlooked system or tool integration that tends to make or break whether an AI agent can operate as a true teammate rather than a disconnected bot?
I have a definite answer to this because it's something that I think everyone overlooks. It's so generally with support sales cases, right? People think, okay, you're going to need access to the orders, you're going to need access to the policies, you're going to need access to the FAQs, and all of that is obviously essential, but no one really misses that. One thing that we found when we implemented these systems is that in many companies, especially the smaller ones, sales and customer support also have a direct line to engineering. So they very often talk to engineering directly and say, hey, like this many customers want, this feature. I've seen this pattern many times. Is this something we can do? And if so, when can we promise this? And can this escalate, right? And often when people automate AI systems to do sales and customer service, they very rarely have that integration. So it can either be a direct integration with Jira or whatever ticket system you use, or just a way to contact the engineers and interpret their responses on dates and estimates and things that they can commit to as autonomous agents. So yeah, I think integrating with leadership, management, engineering, the decision makers in determining like, hey, even if we can't do what someone's asking right now, is there a way that we could? And especially with AI, when it handles all of your queries and has a better sense of what people are asking for at scale, it's really, really good at prioritizing what engineers should prioritize within the business. So,
fantastic. Well, I think this has been a great discussion. Frank, Steve, Max, Akhil, Steve, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us at the event today and the fantastic presentations and conversation. I know that for everyone that's listening in live, you may have some questions that we didn't get to. Up at the top of the site, you'll see the big orange button. If you click on that, we'll get you in touch with any of the speakers that you've heard on this panel or throughout the event, as well as, you can also reach out to anybody on the team here. But with that, I am going to get everybody on their way to the next presentation, which is from Daniel Gorolovsky over at TLV Tech. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.